Hi, everyone. Today, I'm going to share with you some thoughts I had on product management and more importantly about what is the definition of what makes a great product. So quite simply, a great product is more than just that product. It shouldn't be news to anyone who is either a product manager or is trying to become a product manager because it does encompass a lot more than just what is thought of traditionally as a core product. So what do I mean by that? Before I get there, I just want to say that as all of us are consumers of some product, the content that I've put in here would be more or less applicable to anything. It could be software on or non-software. So some of the examples that I have are of cars and devices, not necessarily just software and websites. So just wanted to call that out. So this is probably more or less universally applicable. Just one difference might be that uh, as we think of ourselves as consumers, is usually the person buying it as the person using it. But as we move into more complex products or products that businesses purchase, sometimes the person buying it is not the person using it. So the personas change a little bit in terms of how this is used versus purchased. So just something to think about. But more or less, I think should be simplistic enough for anyone to understand. So with that, just the Zen or the summary of this is that there is a successful product is about addressing three stages. There's the before you purchase the product, there's the after you purchase the product and start using it, and then the ever after. And the experience that you have as a customer or purchaser and user in all of these stages is what defines if the product is good or great. If your experiences are great at all of these stages, that is what really makes the difference. If your experience is good at only one of these, well, maybe not so good. So that's what I'll be describing a little bit more today. So then the question obviously becomes, what is a good experience? Like what makes the difference from checking the green box versus the red box here? Quite simply, I like to think of it as a graph. The more time you spend struggling, which is the y-axis here, is basically the less time you'll spend using, which is shown on the x-axis. So simplistically put, it's an inverse relationship. If you're really spending too much time trying to figure out things, or you're having trouble because there's too many forms to fill, things like that, you're not going to spend any time using and being productive with whatever you're purchasing, right? So simply put, this is you want to be on the right hand, your product needs to be on the right side of this graph where more of your users are spending time using it versus being frustrated with what they cannot do. So that's our goal for good experience or a measure for it. So the good experience, like I said, it's three stages. Before the experience really begins before you even purchase the product, right? You find out about it, you hear about it, hopefully good things. You want to learn more about it. Does it really fit what I'm looking for? So your experience is really beginning before you've even purchased, right, as a customer. So that's important for a product management perspective, because you want to think about how people are perceiving it before they even get there to use it. After you've put, so between the before and the after, there's an important piece, which is the purchase. But this is, I think that's been addressed in a lot of detail with a lot of other material you'll find out there. So I won't spend too much time on it, but I'll allude to it briefly in the before section. After, so once you've purchased it, or you need to be able to know how to use it. Otherwise, you're probably going to return it, right? So again, as a product manager, if you keep that in mind, you'll make sure that people use it, they adopt it, and they continue to use it. And the last stage is probably the one that is the most ignored, which is the ever after. You can get somebody to buy it, you can get someone to use it, but how do you keep them coming back and over, and they want to, let's say if it's a subscription, they want to renew it. If it's a different kind of consumable, they want, when they run out of it, they'll come back and get more of that versus going to a competitor. So if you don't pay attention to this, and if you don't create an ecosystem around facilitating and extending its use, the good experience doesn't last that long. So that's another important thing to consider. So going in order, let's start with the before. So when you're looking at a prospect and you want them to become a customer, how they perceive your product and what they find out about it obviously is critical before they actually purchase it. So what makes this experience good? Well, the key really is you want to balance how much they can learn so that they know enough to want to make a decision on, yes, I want to buy it, or no, I just want to try it, but they do want to make that plunge there. And you also want to balance how much you can learn about them. So how many, you may have encountered salespeople who are at I don't know, at a retail store, and they'll have forms for you to fill out because you want to buy a device. This used to happen a while ago. It doesn't happen as much now, but what is that? That's exactly what I'm talking about. That's friction. You're adding too much on how much you want to learn about your customer versus providing and easily providing how much they want to learn about your product so they make that decision. So the more we balance that out, the better the chances that you'll actually convert them into a sale. And that is what collectively defines that as a good experience. So some examples. So if you look at websites today, typically it's less is more is the kind of the mantra. Most cases you would be asked only to enter your email address. Nobody even wants a name anymore. Depending on the business, of course. So, and I have an example from Shopify on the top and an example of Carvana on the bottom. In either cases, there's really one piece of information that would make it critical, right? So you want to make the experience personalized as possible, but in some cases it's not needed, such as the first one. In the second case, you really need one piece, such as, okay, well, where are you located? What's your zip code? And that's it. And after that, you want to get to the product you would be interested in before you make the purchase. So there is no need to enter tomes of information. What's your zip code? What are your preferences before the sale is even made, right? So that's an example of ask for less information to provide as much as your customer needs or prospect needs. Another great example is the Apple website. In the screen above, it's very clear. Are you here to learn or are you here to buy? And they want to keep those two very separate so that people are focused on getting the information they need. So the first screen is about, well, okay, you want to learn more? Sure. You go in, then you go to the second screen. And at all times, it runs as a scroll top to bottom, and it has features and it's described in a really beautiful format. And up at the top, there is a buy button, which does not go away at all times. It's there. It's very highlighted, as you can see. So there's one example of very low friction and providing information. At this point, nothing has been asked for because the sale hasn't been. It's not yet in the shopping cart, so to speak. Okay, so moving on to the after. So you've purchased the product, you've taken the plunge, you've either purchased it or you've signed up for a trial, right? So if you as a customer don't know how to use it, then that's not going to that's not going to proceed very well, right? You may end up with returns. So as a product manager, you have to be aware that this can get returned. People may stop using it. So the first thing you need to do is make sure they use it, right? So having that good onboarding experience so that they can launch off and do whatever they needed to do is absolutely important. And this applies to all kinds of products, right? It's not software, it's not website. It could be the new coffee machine you purchased. If you don't know how to use it, it may look great, but well, if you can't use it, you're going to return it. So some examples. So there's really two things here in the after purchase. Some products have the benefit of being universally understood. They're consumables. So nobody needs to tell you how to put on a pair of shoes. You probably already know that. You know how to drive a car. And we get more and more into technology. Nobody needs to tell you how to use a phone anymore either, right? Especially now with touchscreens and just all sorts of location information already in there. The devices are smart enough for you to just literally do things with one touch. So as we progress from pure consumables on the top to more intelligent devices towards the bottom of the screen, one thing that is beneficial is like, well, you don't need to really tell anyone to use it because people usually know, here's the key, go in, turn the car on. You probably know how to drive if you're purchasing it, and you're on your way, right? When it comes to the more complex products, these can be, I guess, of two different types. They could be novel, they could be completely new. It's not well understood. Maybe the problem they're solving is also not understood well. So in the screenshot above, it's of a futuristic car. It looks really cool, but I cannot figure out how to get in. Maybe there is something around that that tells you, or that robot over there is supposed to guide you to do that. But that's one example. It can look great. It can be the most cool thing since sliced bread. But if nobody knows how to get in the damn thing, then it's going to be very hard for your product to get usage. Another example, and this is more common, is when the product is so complex that it needs some training. So an example is you're flying a plane. Well, it's not, I mean, it is, there are, you have to get a pilot's license. You're not probably going to be buying a plane. That's not that common, but it does require specific training, similar to what you would need for a car, but obviously a car is more universal. On a cockpit of a plane, there's a gazillion controls you need to learn to be able to use if you're to be able to effectively use this product here, in this case, the plane. So if you extend that to whatever product you're creating, is your product simple or complex? Is it something that people understand and therefore already know how to use or expect to know how to use, because that's also important? Or is the bar high enough that people would expect to be trained on it? And that really defines what your onboarding experience or setup experience for customers would have to be. Otherwise, you risk low adoption, you risk bad reviews, and basically people not coming back. Okay, so just to summarize that, what makes an experience good in the after purchase? Well, in both cases, simple or complex, you want to get the customer to get started using it with as less friction as possible. Having an interface that's intuitive without having to read tomes of manuals is good. Some people like reading manuals, but most people don't. So having interfaces that guide them through it without having to look something up and constantly reference it would be great. Affordances, by that I mean, well, when you get to a door, you know how to open it because there's a knob. If there wasn't a knob or a handle, that's the affordance. So if it's in the place where you need it to be to do the action that you need to do, that is what an intuitive interface provides. When it comes to the more kind of complex products, you want to pay attention to, is there enough guidance around what the customer would expect to do when they get there? Do they need a tour? Do they need a tutorial? Do they need the walkthrough? Do they need hand holding in some cases? Might be possible, but that is extremely, extremely important. Even if your product is the next revolution, if you cannot think about how people would actually end up using it, it may just fall flat and fizzle out before it even got started, which would be a shame, right? Okay, now coming on to the third stage, which I think is actually one of the most important and sadly the most ignored, if you will. The sustained use of your product is obviously what makes for your product being successful. So if your experience just stops and you don't pay attention to how will this cycle keep running, because eventually, remember, customers will come back. And you may call it a renewal, you may call it a fresh purchase, what have you, but you want them to stay loyal to whatever product it is that you're building, and that's the ever after. So what defines a good experience here? There are really two things. One, you have to have a system or an ecosystem rather around it that would promote this product being used so the customer can boomerang and come back. And obviously the product has to be good enough that it's actually solving a problem for them continuously. If they stop having the need for the product, it is not going to be used continuously, right? So let's just look at that. So there's a few bullet points on what this ecosystem could be. An ecosystem really promotes, and I'll get into a few examples in a bit. It promotes and facilitates use, right? So you drive a car. If you don't have gas stations, that's your ecosystem there. You're not going to use it again, right? You have a phone, you need chargers that are pluggable into the country that you're in. That's another ecosystem. It should be, uh, it cannot be a completely different kind of a thing that is not uh, conversant with the power system that you're using. An ecosystem can also anticipate what a customer would need. So, well, by this, I mean you can anticipate what might be a problem they'll encounter and when they might encounter it. So, for that, you want to be able to provide support when it's needed and where it's needed. So, the where part is actually very interesting because we think, well, having a customer service number or a link to submit a ticket or just talk to a chat bot is it. But I think one thing to call out is you need to meet the customer where they are and when they're using your product. To give an example of software, if you expect them to go to a different website to ask a question versus when they're using your product on whatever device, that adds friction right there. That's a bad experience. If they're stuck, let's say they're using it on their phone, if they're stuck, they expect to get the product support there, not let me call somebody. You may have to get there, but the first line of defense or the first line of support there is really to provide it where it's needed. And of course, this should not be a surprise. It should be easy to find. You shouldn't have to uh, jump through hoops to be able to do that. So some examples. The first one is, so this is a Tesla power charging station. So the reason why electric cars are more popular is also there is this sort of these mushrooming stations everywhere. So of course Tesla has the capital to set these up for their cars, but I think that's also one of the reasons why maybe hydrogen fuel cell cars are not as popular because it is. Well, I don't know where to get a new hydrogen fuel cell for one, whereas I see these everywhere. So that's one example of an ecosystem in a non-software world. On the bottom left, this is being easy to find. So this is the Adobe website. The support tab or menu is right on the front. It's easy to find. You don't have to dig too deep. It points you to some other things you may need to look at before you click on Contact Us. And at the bottom right is an example of a chatbot, this one being from Salesforce. It's giving some, because it doesn't, this is an example of an experience where the customer is not logged in. So there's a limit to how much you can personalize it, but this just shows that it is available. It will prompt for certain popularly asked questions. What do you want to do? Are you here for the top three things that they have determined are the most frequently asked? So it's also on their main webpage. Again, easy to find. It could be anyone, so you want to make it addressable to all kinds of problems. And of course, the funnel of how much you can personalize it can get pretty complex. So, but that's another conversation for another day. All right. So as we get to the main takeaway is think about the longevity for your product as you create features. And here's a Venn diagram, as I like to call it, of when you do product management. And they may look a little bit out of sequence, but that's intentional. And that's because I find most product management, it's popularly perceived to be, oh, it's just, when I buy the product, it's going to have, this product should have this, it'll have these kinds of features and bells and whistles, which is really the after, right? That's the yellow bubble right there. A good product manager will also think about, well, sure, but how will people buy it? And how do we monetize it? What's going to make the sale? So, which is also very important. And the last piece is the outermost bubble, which is the ever after. That's that ecosystem that I'm talking about, making sure that you're there to support your customer after they've bought it, after they've gotten set up, they're using it, but you want to ensure that they keep coming back and making sure that you're there to meet them for whatever they need that they may have. So the exceptional product managers will really think about the ever after as well. So with that, I'll just do a recap on the takeaways. And these are the 3 stages, the before, the after, and the ever after. Remember that experience begins before the product's purchased. You have to make sure that your product is being used. They have, your customers have a way to either know how to use it or be trained how to use it. And also remember that it doesn't end there. The story goes around and comes back in a circle. So make sure your ecosystem to complete that loop exists, so you can extend the good experience for your customer. And I'll just leave you with this. If the quality and the price is the same for the same similar kinds of products, the customers will come back for the experience. So one of the popular examples I like to use is coffee. And anyone can make coffee, but it's the experience that defines, are you going to the Pete's, are you going to the Starbucks, or are you going to go to the small mom and pop shop that may be next door? So keep that in mind and be an exceptional product manager, build for the longevity. And that's it.